Hello, I'm Gaby Alcalá, the creator of A Cada Paso. This podcast explores the life of individuals who may not be famous, but that are making a significant difference in their community. We are here to show that there is wisdom and inspiration all around us in the stories of those who quietly impact the world.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Well, I'm supposed to stay as close as possible to the microphone, so it's gonna take some getting used to it. Well, I wanna thank everybody for coming tonight. I know it's summer. It's a beautiful night. You are indoors. I know how difficult that is. I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to the Podcast Garage for giving us this space. This is great, and for all the support that you have given us. And I want to thank Maureen because Maureen, when I was talking to her about doing a podcast live, she says you need to put a date. It cannot be an idea. So what is the date? And she sent me a text again saying, what's the date? That was in October 2023. It took us 6 months. And not for lack of effort. So for those, many of you already know A Cada Paso podcast, but I just want to go quickly. I want to explain why I do this podcast. And the reason I started doing this podcast is because I feel there are so many people around us impacting all of us and their communities, but they do it in a silent way and nobody knows about them. It's like everybody pays attention to whoever is famous, but not to the people around us that are really impacting. And many people ask me when I posted this, they say, how do you find these amazing people? And I said, these people are around us. And so we just we need to pay attention to see those people that are really impacting all of us. So I want to thank you for joining. Claudio, I was at a birthday party, Clara's birthday party, and I said at some point something that probably I shouldn't have said, and he very nicely responded in the nice way. We're going to get to that. And that's how we got the idea of doing this. So, Claudio, can you introduce yourself?
Well, yeah, of course. Well, thank you first for inviting me. It's great to have this opportunity to chat a little bit. My name is Claudio Morera. I am a pediatric gastroenterologist, so I will probably be able to see all you guys in my clinic. The age that I usually see is 22 years and younger, but many of the things that we're going to be talking today applies also to adult patients. And I work at Children's Hospital and Boston Medical Center. I've been here almost 20 years. And
you're a great cook.
I'm a great cook.
You actually want to see him more for that than the other piece, hopefully.
That's true.
So why do you choose gastroenterologist or gastroenterology? Yes.
Perfect.
Why do you choose that?
Well, I trained in Venezuela, and I did my medical school in Venezuela in Central University, and then I did my residency also in Caracas in part of the Central University network of affiliated hospitals. I did in Pérez Carreño, and during that residency, I started to like gastrointestinal disorders, in children, and then I did my fellowship at Hospital Los Magallanes. And
so what does it mean I start liking these issues? Why?
Well, kids that came with, diseases associated with her gastrointestinal tract that were beyond the typical diarrhea, beyond the typical, short-lived abdominal pain that require more long-term treatment or more complex diseases. You see them when you're training to be a pediatrician, and they require special treatment. So that, it's an evolution. It's not that I didn't get into pediatrics thinking of that. It just evolved into that.
Like many things in life, we don't choose, we just keep doing, or life takes us there.
Or life choose for us.
Yes. So I was going to say the story on how we arrived here. I was at this party, and I don't know why I said something about IBS. Say what it means.
Irritable bowel syndrome,
Yes.
doesn't it?
And I said, oh, yes, but that's mental. And you say, yes, it is. And it is mental, it is real. So this is how we got here, because I think many people are suffering from IBS or any other gut condition. And there is a lot of dismissal about the role of the brain and these conditions. So you gave me a really nice answer about this connection. So can you tell us what is the connection between gut and the brain?
Nowadays, irritable bowel syndrome is part of what we nowadays call disorders of the gut-brain interaction. Mm-hmm. There is a constant interaction between the gut and the brain. And coming back to the comment regarding it's in your mind, my answer was more directed towards mental health disorders. Mm-hmm. And this is bias that we all share. And there is a lot of stigma with mental health disorders. And a mental health disorder is an illness, like any other illness, that doesn't have an x-ray that shows something or a blood test that shows something, but it doesn't make it any less real. So that was what I wanted to tell. The fact that if you have a depression, that you don't have a test to diagnose it doesn't make it less important and less. So we need to start working in destigmatizing mental health disorder. Irritable bowel syndrome, disorders of the gut brain are not mental health disorders. But I use that as an opportunity to.
So, but what are they? I mean, it's
so disorders of the gut-brain interaction. The definition that we have is what in medicine called clinical definition. Is based on symptoms that the patient have. Mm-hmm. There is no what we call also in medicine biological marker. When you have diabetes, I check the hemoglobin A1C, which is a type of hemoglobin that is associated with high sugar, and I can tell you when it's above that much, you have diabetes. Easy diagnosis. These are disorders, but when you have a migraine, I can do CAT scans and I can do MRIs and electroencephalograms, and everything is normal, but you still have the headache. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we don't have a test that makes the diagnosis doesn't make it any less real. And we use clinical symptoms to make the diagnosis. Well, irritable disorders of the gut-brain interaction are very similar. There is a set of criteria that we have as physicians available to us, and they're multiple. It's not just irritable bowel syndrome. There's in the esophagus, in the stomach, in the abdomen, in the colon. Constipation is one of them. Reflux disease is another one of them. Many disorders are related to abnormalities in the way the gut communicates with the brain and vice versa.
But is it that because of stress, because of the diet that you follow? What is it? I mean, why does it appear?
Yes. The answer is yes. It's because of all that.
Okay.
So all these influence the way the gut and the brain communicate. The gut is not a tube that allows to digest. It's a very, very, very complex organ that in an adult can measure 10 feet. 8 feet. It's very, very long. You have a lining inside called mucosa. That is the one that interact with the environment. We interact with our environment through the skin, through the lung, and our surface that we interact in the skin is 1.5 square meters. Let's use that number. Then you have the lungs, which is a little bit more than that. And then you have the lining in the stomach. You eat. Mm-hmm. That's environment. And then it gets into your gut. And then in your gut, we have folds inside the gut. And each fold has like little hairs that are another folds. And each hair has different cells. And in the tip of the cells, there are multiple tiny, tiny hairs too. All that is to increase the surface so we can digest and absorb. If we were able to spread the surface available in the gastrointestinal tract to interact with the environment, is a tennis court surface.
Oh my God.
So we communicate with our environment way more through our gut than through the rest of the other organs. that we have. Then on top of that, we are not a single organ. We are an ecosystem. And we have a lot of bacteria and viruses and fungi in our skin, in our upper airway, in the urinary tract, in the genital area, and in the gut.
So could IBS be caused by excess of bacteria? Because some people have it, some other people don't.
We all have bacteria. We need it. We can't live without that bacteria.
Probably these people have way more? No.
Well, what has been shown, these are very good points, and this is an active research field nowadays. It's called the microbiota, which is the normal bacteria that we have and how it affects health and disease. Not only irritable bowel syndrome is associated with multiple other conditions, inflammatory bowel disease, even mental health disorders have been associated. And I'm using the word associated very purposefully because it hasn't been shown cause effect, just association. And has to do with certain type of microorganism and the variety. So people with certain conditions have more variety of certain conditions and of certain microorganism, and people with other conditions has a less variety. So it's not only the number that you have and how diverse they are. But we need them to fight harmful bacteria or viruses. We need them to produce vitamin K, for example. Yeah. We don't make vitamin K. Our gut make it for us. Okay.
I read once that Latin women are more prone to IBS.
Well, there is nice data. That's open another can of worms because minoritized populations are less studied regarding this thing. But there is nice data out there with Hispanic population that they have also significant frequency of functional disorders of the gut-brain interaction, which is very common. It's one of the main reasons to go to the gastroenterologist. 30% of population can have that.
So what can someone with IBS, what can they do to deal with this? I mean, it's pretty annoying. Is there something, exercise, food, what?
So one of the first things the first thing is discuss it with your doctor, because there are several things that look like irritable bowel syndrome that are not irritable bowel syndrome.
Oh, you shouldn't be said that today. A lot of people are going to go to the doctor tomorrow.
Well, for example, if you have a lactose intolerance and you drink lactose, you get belly pain, you have gas, and you have diarrhea. Those are symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome too, but what you have is lactose intolerance.
Yeah.
You eliminate lactose and then you feel better. If you have celiac disease, you eat gluten, bread or pasta, you have bloating, you can have belly pain, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. But you don't have irritable bowel syndrome. What you have is celiac disease. Okay, so there are multiple other conditions that quote unquote mimic disorders of the gut-brain interaction.
Okay, let's assume this person has.
And that's the first thing. So when you discuss it with your doctor, I have these symptoms. We do this basic test, and it's and the treatment starts at that moment. We tell the patient, I'm doing these tests not to find out what you have, because your symptoms are very compatible with irritable bowel syndrome. I'm doing this test to find triggers of your symptoms. Because there are patients with lactose intolerance that don't have all these disorders, have certain symptoms that are not that distressing. So you can have both. You can have irritable bowel syndrome and lactose intolerance. But if you eat lactose, you trigger an event.
Yeah.
So you need to control your lactose intolerance. So that started a moment. I know what you have. You have irritable bowel syndrome. I'm looking for triggers of your episodes.
Don't go anywhere. We're coming back. For now, listen to our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Arco Homes, experts in the design and construction of premium homes tailored to your dreams. Follow them on Instagram and LinkedIn at Arco Homes, or their website at www.thearcohomes.com.
So what else can a person who has IBS can do?
So there are multiple management options. The first thing is that When I tell a patient of mine that they have a disorder of the gut-brain interaction, particularly irritable bowel syndrome, I say this is good news and bad news.
Okay.
Good news is nobody dies from it.
Okay. Good.
Bad news is nobody gets cured from it. Okay? So we manage those symptoms and we help the patient. And I start with education, with explaining what the patient have. In many chronic illnesses or diseases, the patient needs to understand what is going on, so it can have it give them control. When you understand what is going on, it gives you a little bit of control. It's one technique for resilience. You do better. I have hypertension, and I know that hypertension is a chronic disease, that there is a genetic component and a diet component, and it's not a mysterious stuff. We know what you have, and that alone helps the patient. Okay, so I start with the education. I explain that disorders of the gut-brain interaction are complex disorders where there is a component of how the bowel moves. So patients with irritable bowel syndrome and constipation, the colon is more sluggish, or patients with irritable bowel syndrome and diarrhea, the colon moves faster and have diarrhea. And one of the reasons they can move faster is because the bacteria are, quote unquote, out of balance or have bacterial overgrowth, or they have a digestive issue like fructose intolerance, for example, and all these type of things, and that produce the diarrhea. But also how we feel it. So the sensation from the gut. 70% of the information between brain and gut is sensory. It's the brain feeling what is going on, And then you can have lower threshold of pain because of mild inflammation. If you have lower threshold of pain, stimuli that shouldn't produce pain, your brain feels it as pain. Okay, and then, or you can have a what we call allodynia, meaning that an abnormal interpretation of the sensation is a normal stimuli, but your brain interprets wrong. Pain lives in the brain. Pain doesn't live where you feel it. I have 2 examples for that. People with chronic diabetes, the nerve endings die because of the diabetes. And they are walking on big ulcers in the foot and say, how can you walk on this thing? It's not hurting a lot because the nerves doesn't transmit the information. When you need stitches and the doctors put numbing medication, the numbing medication, what it does is blocks the transmission of that stimulus to the brain. So it doesn't get to the brain. So the brain, nothing is happening. And you have the other example, people that, for example, lose a limb because of an accident. And then they have an itch in a foot. How can you have an itch in a foot that you don't have, or pain? Because the area in the brain where that foot was mapped gets activated and is interpreted as pain. So this triangle of abnormalities affect the production of symptoms. And because there is a component in the brain, if you are nervous, certain psychological, this is an oversimplification for didactic purposes. It's more complex than that. Certain filters that we have that block normal information are open. And now you start receiving information from your parts in the body that you shouldn't be getting. But the higher parts of your brain doesn't understand that. And now you have pain when it's a normal sensation.
So I talk about this with a lot of my friends. And one thing that I hear a lot is it doesn't happen for many people when they're not in the United States. They're eating other type of foods. So what's the role of food here in the United States? I mean, it sounds like when they're, or is it that they're relaxed when they're out? What is it?
All that could be. Could be that they're just more relaxed and then they have having a better time. They're eating foods that are familiar. But also there is a dietary component. Definitely there is a clear association with certain foods. The amount of bacteria that is in the food, the probiotics, all that influences the sensation and the movement of the bowel. Mm-hmm. So all that is true. Mm-hmm. And there's multiple factors associated with that. The lines of treatment of particularly irritable bowel syndrome, not necessarily for other gut-brain interaction disorders, is several things. We work with diet. There are certain foods that are recognized can trigger symptoms that produce gas, that are, the non-celiac gluten intolerance, the lactose intolerance that we talk about, if there is fructose malabsorption, if there is a little bit of bacterial overgrowth, then, that's why certain antibiotics work for certain people. And then you have certain medications. So anxiety, depression, and stress management, also that helps.
What is the biggest misconception that exists between the connection of the gut and the brain?
That's a tough question, because I can tell you what I think it is for what I've,
Tell us what
remember.
You think.
Based on, the patients that I see. When I tell the patient there is a component of anxiety and a psychological component, it has to be worded in a way that is conducive to communication, that I don't block the communication. So an important part of my job is read the audience,
of course,
pretty much, and then understand where the people are at that. And then because they feel, okay, they're telling me that this is psychological. No, I'm not telling you it's psychological. I'm telling you there is a component of psychology. And you're one body. You're not a gut. You're not a brain. So everything is interconnected, And I say the example, for example, a child that has a cold and doesn't feel well. And then during the day, he's kind of cranky, but he's running around. But then at night, start more cranky and crying more. It doesn't mean that the cold got worse. He's tired. So now you have another layer of complexity to the symptoms that make the symptoms worse. But the cold is not worse. It's just the child that is one child is not separate in symptoms.
Yeah.
Everything affects the other one. The number of nerve cells that we have in our gastrointestinal tract is almost the same number of nerve cells that we have in the spine. That many. The nerve cells communicate with each other through substances called neurotransmitters that are released by one nerve cell and gets to the receptor in another nerve cell. That's how they talk to each other. The variety of neurotransmitters that we have in the gut is the same variety of neurotransmitters that we have in the brain, 50-odd something. Many of the medications that we use for depression and anxiety are what they call serotonin, substance selective receptor inhibitor. 95% of the serotonin in our body, where do you think it is? Is in the gut. So all the medications that you use for the brain works in the gut.
You gave me really bad news right now. I mean, I thought it was my brain talking to me the whole day, but it's probably the gut talking to me.
It's probably your gut talking to you the whole day. What do you think I cook?
Okay, so let's turn now about you, not necessarily about the gut and the brain. You are a person who enjoys life really nicely. I mean, you seem to be a very relaxed person with a lot of things you love to do. So tell us about this. How do you manage the stress of being a physician, of dealing with patients, and the craziness of the healthcare sector? You didn't say that. I said that. Tell us, how do you manage it?
I don't know what to tell you. Honest to God, I think it's a combination between two things. One, I consider myself a positive person. I'm a half full glass kind of person. I consider myself simple. Because there are 3 or 4 things that for me are extremely important, and the rest are not that important. And I've been extremely lucky to get many of them.
What are those things?
Well, the first one, I have a partner in life that is the best luck that I've had.
Yes.
Okay, that has given me the best gift ever, which is my two beautiful daughters that turned out to be how I wanted them to be.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Okay, can we switch the podcast to that?
And then I have the incredible luck that I truly love what I do. And I don't know if I went into that activity because I loved it or I got in love with that. That's what I think. I'm simple, because this is a good strategy. I mean, if you're stuck doing something, you may as well love it, because many times we just cannot choose where, and many of us here are immigrants. It's not that you woke up one day and say, I'm going to be an immigrant. You just, life put you in that situation, and we just did it.
Yes.
And many times the decision was made in a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
And you just do it. And then you learn to have a good life, and then you enjoy your life. So that's what I'm talking about, like,
You're simple.
Simple thing. And I remember telling my daughters that what I wish you for your career is that I asked them, there are many people out there that probably love what they do as much as I love what I do as a profession. But I doubt there's many people that love it more. I really enjoy it. And I told them, I wish for you guys to find a career that you love as much as I love mine, and the same for their mom. I mean, we found career paths that we thoroughly enjoy, and it's an important part of our happiness.
There have to be something you don't like about your career. What don't you like?
Yeah, there are things that I don't like. Yeah. It's getting tougher, and I don't mind hard work, and I don't mind, long hours or anything. The oddness of the middle of the night of being a physician and the weekends, it's annoying. It's not that bad. I don't hate it, but I don't particularly like it. As you advance in your career, you shift your focus a little bit more. I don't have the physical stamina when you're younger to do all the hard physical work of being a young physician. So you start preparing towards the times in your life where you use more your brain and less your body. Mm-hmm. So I'm working a lot in leadership and having leadership positions in the pediatric department and so forth. So, and that's dealing with people and dealing with adults. I'd rather deal with kids. So that part, kids is what you see is what you get. Adults, you always have to be walking on eggshells many times, and I'm sure you guys, have similar experience,
So how do you deal with the things that you don't enjoy as much? So when you wake up in the morning and, you're going to have a hard day, I know you're a hard worker, but you're going to be in a meeting the whole day with these adults. What do you tell yourself to keep?
I just do it. I just okay, this is what I need to do. And, and once again, I'm in general positive. And I say it at home all the time. Okay, what is the learning experience from this? There's always an opportunity to learn something. And then, I don't know. I don't have a straight answer for that. I just don't put too much thought into that.
That's good.
Because I don't have a choice. I'm like, okay, let's do it. That's it.
Again, I think that problem is that I think too much. Okay. What is the biggest mistake you have made in your life?
I've made a lot of mistakes. Okay. So I don't think one is bigger than the other one.
Well, tell us about
one.
But
the mistakes, I cannot give you an example particularly of one, but what I can tell you is that the mistakes or the decisions or actions that I've made that then I regret or I wasn't too happy with them happened when I did not respect myself. In my rhythm and in my time of making that decisions. There are decisions that you need to think more or that you want to think more, not necessarily you need to, but you want to think more. So when I have not respected those rhythms of myself, I made decisions that I regretted. Maybe if I took the time, it was going to be a mistake too, but it was going to be my mistake. I own it. In that way, I own it because I made it, but at the same didn't, because the person who made that mistake wasn't the person that I wanted to be when I made the mistake. So as I grow older, I try to work. This is a part of personal growth to what is my rhythm? What is my personal style to deal with this issue?
So I want to ask you, if you could have a drink tonight or have something to eat with someone in the world, whoever you want to choose, alive or not, who would that person be and what question would you ask?
That's a hard question. I would have a drink with my father.
And what question would you ask?
I would like to, because I'm almost the same age that he had when he died. He was 64. I'm not 64. I'm far from that. But I mean that. So I would like to ask him, what was he thinking? What was his guidance? He was a very strong man, a hard worker, a Canary Island farmer that got into 4th grade. That's it. And then his 3 kids are college graduates. Wow. And then my second brother is a highly accomplished engineer, and the third one is a lawyer. So, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Wow. as a mature man, how did you guide your life? So I missed that opportunity many times.
Yeah. So I always end the podcast, and we're gonna have a Q&A. But I end the podcast with something that my father used to say. And there's one that came to my mind when I was listening to you, and my father had the same philosophy of life that you just shared with us. And is, you don't let, well, I have to say it in Spanish, no dejes que los árboles te tapen el bosque. I think it's, don't let the trees obstruct the forest, I guess. It's like, don't let the little things in life block the view of the big picture. Yeah. So thank you. It was really needed.
No, thank you.
This podcast has been edited and produced by Bitmark, a marketing agency specialized in digital content. You can find them on social media as @Bitmark.